a cloth that defies time. There are relics in history, and then there are mysteries that transcend history itself. Among them, none has stirred the imagination, provoked the skeptic, and inspired the believer more than the Shroud of Turin. A simple piece of linen, measuring just over 4 meters long, it bears the faint yet unmistakable image of a crucified man. For centuries, millions have whispered the same question: could this be the very burial shroud of Jesus Christ? Now, in the 21st century, artificial intelligence has turned its unblinking gaze upon the shroud. With algorithms capable of detecting patterns invisible to the human eye, AI has begun to reveal secrets hidden for nearly 2 millennia. And what it has uncovered is nothing short of breathtaking. For those who already believed, it is a confirmation of faith. For those who doubted, it is a haunting challenge. But the shroud is more than a scientific puzzle. It is a window into the sacred. Every fiber tells a story of agony, sacrifice, and transcendent love. Every faint trace of blood testifies to the wounds of redemption. And the image itself, neither painted nor burned nor explained by science, speaks of a mystery that seems to echo from beyond death, the resurrection. The history of the shroud. The shroud's journey is as mysterious as the image it bears. Tradition holds that it first appeared in the city of Edessa, hidden away by early Christians who revered it as a sacred relic. Later, it surfaced in Constantinople, only to vanish again during the chaos of the Crusades. When it re-emerged in the 14th century in France, it immediately ignited devotion and controversy alike. By the 16th century, the shroud found its way to Turin, Italy, where it has been guarded ever since. Fires, wars, and revolutions threatened to destroy it, yet it survived, as if protected by an unseen hand. When flames once licked the edges of the reliquary, witnesses testified that the linen itself remained miraculously intact, save for scorch marks that still frame its image today. Pilgrims came by the thousands. They wept, they prayed, they fell silent before the ghostly figure on the cloth. Was it truly Christ? The Church, cautious and humble, has never declared it dogma. Yet for the faithful, the shroud has become a fifth gospel, a visual testimony to the suffering and triumph of the Lord. The first glimpses of mystery. Long before AI ever scanned its fibers, scientists puzzled over the image. Unlike any artwork in history, it was not produced with paint, dye, or brush. The image rests only on the uppermost threads of the fabric, so delicate that it disappears when viewed up close, yet comes alive when seen from a distance. Negative photography in 1898 revealed astonishing detail. The wounds of crucifixion, the swelling of the face, the rivulets of blood from the crown of thorns. How could a medieval forger, centuries before photography, have produced such a perfect negative image, one that even modern science struggles to explain? Theories abounded. Some claimed it was a painting, yet chemical analysis revealed no pigments. Others argued it was a scorch mark, yet heat penetrates fibers differently. Still others suggested it was the work of genius artistry. But artistry cannot explain the accuracy of the wounds, the anatomical precision, or the microscopic traces of real human blood identified as type AB. Every attempt to dismiss the shroud has only deepened the mystery. It resists explanation, as if deliberately, so as if it were not meant to be reduced to artifact, but received as testimony. Theology, woven in linen for believers. The shroud is more than linen. It is sacrament in thread, a silent homily woven with suffering and glory. It portrays not the triumphant Christ of mosaics, crowned in gold, but the humiliated Christ of Calvary, beaten, scourged, pierced, dead. And yet, paradoxically, it is precisely in that death that life bursts forth. The shroud becomes a bridge between Good Friday and Easter Sunday. It shows the marks of passion, but also something more mysterious. An image imprinted not by hand, but perhaps by the very light of resurrection. As one theologian observed, It is as though the cloth itself was scorched with the fire of eternal life at the very moment when Christ passed from death to glory. Thus, to gaze upon the shroud is to stand at the threshold of the empty tomb. It is to see with trembling the shadow of the greatest miracle in history, the age of AI. A new gaze upon the shroud. For centuries, the Shroud of Turin was studied by human eyes, microscopes, cameras, and chemical tests. Each new tool raised more questions than it answered. But now in the digital age, artificial intelligence has been unleashed upon this ancient relic. Unlike the human observer, AI sees patterns where we see randomness. It can scan millions of pixels, analyze fibers at microscopic scale, and reconstruct three-dimensional images from flat surfaces. When AI scanned the shroud, the results astonished even seasoned researchers. The faint face that had captivated believers suddenly came alive with uncanny clarity. The bruises, the swelling, the trails of blood became sharper. AI algorithms enhance the depth of the image, revealing a three-dimensional body, not a flat imprint. Forensic experts were struck the man of the shroud was not an artistic invention. He was real with anatomical detail, impossible for medieval forgers to invent. Some AI reconstructions even suggested that the shroud preserves something beyond human death. As if the cloth captured a burst of radiant energy, a flash of light so intense it seared an image into linen without burning it. Scientists hesitate to say it. Theologians whisper it openly. Perhaps what AI has uncovered is the very trace of the resurrection itself. Science meets the sacred skeptics have long insisted that faith and science cannot coexist. The shroud shatters that illusion. Here is a relic that welcomes investigation. Carbon dating spectroscopy digital imaging and yet eludes final explanation. Every attempt to demystify it circles back to the same conclusion. The shroud cannot be reduced to fraud or accident. In 1988, carbon dating tests controversially suggested a medieval origin. Headlines screamed, "Shroud proven fake." But later studies revealed flaws. The sample tested came from a corner repaired after a fire in the 1500s, contaminated with newer fibers. When more advanced techniques were applied, the dating results swung back toward the 1st century. Pollen grains embedded in the cloth matched plants found only in ancient Palestine. Dust samples aligned with the geology of Jerusalem. Even traces of rare Middle Eastern limestone were found near the image of the feet. AI, far from debunking, has amplified the mystery. Its scans confirmed that the image has no brushstrokes, no pigments, no physical medium. The coloration rests only on the outermost fibrils of the linen, thinner than a human hair. Nothing penetrates beneath. It is as if light itself etched the figure, a light unknown to science, but known perhaps to faith. Forensic analysis adds yet more weight. The wounds align with Roman crucifixion practices, nails through wrists, scourge marks consistent with whips tipped with bone and metal blood flows that follow gravity in positions matching suspension on a cross. This is not artistic imagination. It is clinical reality. And yet the image itself impossible to reproduce. Impossible to explain, hovers between history and miracle. The face of Christ, revealed what AI has given us beyond technical data, is intimacy. The reconstructions built from faint imprints show the face of a man who suffered beyond measure. His nose is broken, his cheeks swollen, his brow pierced. His lips are parched, his hair matted with blood. And yet there is peace. For believers, this face is not just any man. It is the face of Jesus gazing back across 2 millennia. Not the stylized Christ of icons, not the idealized Christ of Renaissance paintings, but the bruised, beaten, utterly human Son of God. And herein lies the paradox. It is in this brokenness that divinity shines most brightly. The shroud is not a portrait of glory, but of agony. And yet from that agony radiates a power that has converted hearts, healed souls, and renewed faith for generations. Some who view the AI reconstructions describe an overwhelming sense of presence. It is as though the algorithms have not only clarified an image, but unveiled a person. For those with eyes of faith, that person is alive. The shroud does not merely show a dead man. It testifies to one who passed through death into eternal life, a gospel written in cloth. Theologians often call the shroud the fifth gospel. While Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John tell the story with words, the shroud tells it with silence. Every blood stain is a sentence. Every fold of linen is a verse. The entire passion is written in its fibers, the scourging, the crowning with thorns, the crucifixion, the piercing of the side. But beyond Good Friday, the shroud hints at Easter. For what created the image? No brush, no hand, no chemical. It is as though the cloth was struck by a burst of radiant energy, light exploding from within the body it wrapped. Scientists speculate about ultraviolet lasers and unknown radiation. Believers call it by its true name, resurrection. If this is true, then the shroud is not merely a relic. It is a witness. It is the silent testimony of linen that touched the very moment when death was defeated. AI may enhance the pixels, but faith hears the message: He is not here. He is risen. Witnesses. Across the centuries, the shroud has never been a relic for the curious alone. It has been a relic for the faithful. Across the centuries, countless witnesses have stood before it: kings and peasants, popes and skeptics, saints and sinners. All have left changed. In the Middle Ages, when it was first displayed, pilgrims would travel hundreds of miles on foot just to glimpse its faded lines. Many wept openly. Some claimed healings both physical and spiritual. For them, the shroud was not proof in a courtroom sense, but a mirror of their own faith. The saints in particular spoke of it as a living sign. St. John Paul II, who prayed before the shroud in Turin, declared it a mirror of the gospel, urging the world to look not at the cloth itself, but at the man it reveals. For him, the shroud was not an idol, but a window, a thin veil through which the mystery of Christ's suffering shines. Even skeptics, though unconvinced, confess to being haunted. The shroud does not fade from memory. Its face lingers, its wounds speak silently, and its unanswered questions echo long after one leaves its presence. By modernity and the call of faith. What makes the shroud so astonishing today is its survival into the digital age. In an era when faith is often dismissed as superstition, the shroud confronts us with a paradox, a relic that grows more mysterious the more it is studied. AI was expected to settle the debate once and for all. Instead, it has deepened it. Here lies the tension between modernity and mystery. Algorithms can sharpen pixels, enhance contrast, and reconstruct hidden dimensions, but they cannot explain how the image was made. They cannot account for the presence of Middle Eastern pollen. They cannot deny the forensic precision of crucifixion wounds. They cannot erase the centuries of devotion, the tears of pilgrims, the conversions inspired. If anything, AI becomes an unwitting evangelist. By stripping away doubts about artistry or forgery, it leaves us face to face with the unexplainable. And when confronted with what cannot be explained, humanity is drawn once more toward what must be worshipped. In a world obsessed with data and proof, the shroud quietly proclaims that faith is not opposed to reason, but transcends it. Science may describe, but only faith can receive. The shroud's message for humanity. What then does the shroud say to us today? It does not shout. It does not argue. It simply shows us a man broken, crushed, humiliated, and yet radiant. It whispers that love is stronger than death, that sacrifice is not defeat, that God Himself entered into the very depths of human suffering to redeem it from within. In the age of AI, where machines can mimic creativity and algorithms can scan the depths of ancient relics, the shroud stands as a divine contradiction. Technology may reveal details, but only God reveals meaning. What the shroud ultimately offers is not information, but transformation. It calls us to believe not in linen, but in the one, the linen once wrapped.
Yet still a mark remains.
It calls us to see in the face of the crucified not despair, but hope. It calls us, as it called the disciples at the empty tomb, to hear the angel's words. Why do you seek the living among the dead? He is not here. He is risen. A silent light in the darkness. The Shroud of Turin is, and will likely remain, one of the greatest mysteries of faith and science alike. For centuries, it has defied explanation, endured attacks, and survived fires. Today, even under the scrutiny of artificial intelligence, it refuses to give up its ultimate secret. And yet perhaps that is precisely the point. The Shroud is not meant to end debate, but to awaken wonder.
History shows facts.
It is not meant to prove God like a solved equation, but to draw us closer to Him through mystery. Its silence is its loudest proclamation. As the AI scans fade into lines of data and researchers publish their findings, the Shroud continues to gaze back at us with that bruised yet peaceful face. It asks us the same question it has asked for centuries. Do you believe for it? For those who answer yes, the Shroud is not just a relic, but a revelation. Not just cloth, but a canvas scorched with divine light. Not just an image of a dead man, but the testimony of the living God who conquered death. The last word belongs not to science, nor to skeptics, nor even to AI, but to faith. And faith declares what the Shroud has always proclaimed in silence: Christ is risen. Truly, He is risen. The cross that stopped the cameras. Divine meaning in The Chosen. When art meets the sacred film sets, are places of precision, timing, and control. Every line, every gesture, every camera movement is planned in advance. Yet there are moments in cinema when something happens that no director can orchestrate, moments that transcend art and brush against the divine. One such moment occurred during the filming of The Chosen, the groundbreaking series about the life of Jesus.
I've never seen anything like this.
As the cast and crew prepared to film one of the most harrowing sequences, the crucifixion of Christ, the director suddenly halted production.
It wasn't a technical interruption.
Overwhelmed by what he saw unfolding, he whispered,
brushed against the divine.
"I've never seen anything like this."
This story explores what
What happened on that set was more than a technical interruption. It was a collision between storytelling and the sacred.
Known for its humanity.
For a few minutes, the cameras did not merely record a performance. They bore witness to the mystery of the cross. This article will explore that moment and what it reveals, not just about filmmaking, but about the eternal meaning of the crucifixion. We will look at why the scene carried such overwhelming power, why the cross remains at the heart of Christian faith, and why even in the artificial environment of a film set, the presence of God can break through. The Chosen and its vision. Before diving into the crucifixion scene, it is important to understand what The Chosen represents. Unlike many biblical films that attempt a glossy one-time retelling of the Gospels, The Chosen is a multi-season series designed to draw viewers into the humanity and divinity of Jesus across time. Its creator, Dallas Jenkins, envisioned not just a dramatization of Scripture, but an encounter, a way for modern audiences to feel what it might have been like to walk with Christ, hear His voice, and see His miracles unfold. From its first episodes, the series set itself apart with authenticity. Characters speak with raw emotion, not stiff religiosity. The dusty roads, crowded markets, and anguished cries of lepers make the world of first-century Judea feel alive. The Jesus of The Chosen is both accessible and mysterious. A man who laughs with children, yet whose eyes seem to hold eternity. Because of this, the crucifixion sequence carried enormous weight. Audiences had followed this Jesus through seasons of teaching, healing, and friendship. To watch Him suffer and die would not be a distant religious ritual. but the breaking of a relationship they had come to love.
Barely contain.
For the cast and crew filming the crucifixion was not just another scene. It was the center of the story, the climax of the gospel, the moment on which all of history turns. When the director called, "Stop the Crucifixion" is always the most difficult scene to film in any Jesus movie. From the Passion of the Christ to smaller productions, filmmakers have struggled to capture the horror without losing sight of the hope.
It didn't feel
On the set of The Chosen, as the actor portraying Jesus was lifted onto the cross, the atmosphere shifted. Silence fell over the crew. Extras playing Roman soldiers hesitated. Even the sound of the wind seemed to pause. The director, Dallas Jenkins, had seen hundreds of scenes shot before. He had shouted "cut in action" more times than he could count. But this time he stopped everything, not because of a mistake, but because of awe.
about performance or craft.
Looking at the actors stretched on the beams, crowned with thorns. Blood trickling down, Jenkins whispered words that would later echo in interviews. "I've never seen anything like this." Those who were present describe a palpable presence on set. Some crew members wept openly. Others stood frozen, unable to move. For a moment, it did not feel like cinema. It felt like Calvary. Why? Because the cross, even when reenacted, carries a weight beyond performance. It is the axis of history, the place where sin and salvation meet the throne of the King who rules by suffering.
It was not horror they felt.
To behold it even in dramatized form is to confront the greatest mystery of faith, that God himself chose to die for the love of his children. The theology of the cross. For 2,000 years, Christians have proclaimed the crucifixion not as tragedy alone, but as triumph. At first glance, it looks like the collapse of a movement, a young rabbi silenced by political and religious powers, executed in humiliation. Yet the Gospels insist it was precisely in this weakness that God's strength was revealed. The Apostle Paul, writing to the Corinthians, declared, "We preach Christ crucified, a stumbling block to Jews and foolishness to Gentiles, but to those who are called. Christ, the power of God and the wisdom of God." 1 Cor 1, 23-24. The cross is a paradox, defeat, that is victory, shame, that is glory, death, that births life. On the set of The Chosen, this paradox came alive. The actor nailed to the beams was not Jesus himself. Yet his portrayal carried echoes of the truth.
Perhaps because it was
For a
not
fleeting
about
moment,
showing
the
suffering,
mystery of redemption seemed to step through the
but
veil
showing
of fiction.
meaning.
Those present were reminded that the cross was not just an ancient execution device. It was and is the altar of salvation. This is why the crucifixion is so different from other scenes in film history. Battles, romances, tragedies, these can stir emotion, but they do not carry eternal weight. The cross does. It is cosmic in scope. It is the hinge of history. Every sin ever committed, every tear ever shed, every hope ever dreamed, converges on those beams of wood. To depict it honestly is to walk on holy ground. Why the scene felt different. Many films have shown crucifixions. Some focus on the brutality, the gore, the physical suffering. Others downplay the violence to avoid offending audiences. But in The Chosen, something else happened. The director's sudden pause revealed that the power of the cross does not come merely from how realistic the blood looks, but from the presence it conveys.
The crown,
Those who were
the
there
wood,
said the silence felt
expression,
heavy, as though
all
time
too
itself
human.
slowed.
all too real.
For a brief span, the set no longer felt like a set.
Watching later would
The
sense it
boundaries
too.
between acting
The
and reality
sincerity that
blurred.
pierced through the lens.
The crown of thorns looked too real, the body on the cross too vulnerable.
To just be a
It was not the artistry alone that made it powerful. It was the recognition that what they were depicting was true, not just historically, but eternally.
Reverence.
Jesus really had been nailed to wood.
For a
He really had
moment,
bled. He really had whispered
gave way to
forgiveness for his
something that felt
executioners.
eternal.
And because of that, the cross is not just a story to
Every
be told,
generation
but a
retells the
presence
story
to be
in its own
encountered.
way.
This is
But
why
the
Jenkins
mystery
whispered,
remains new.
"I've never seen anything like this."
Even modern
He was not
audiences
referring to the
sense that
skill of his
cross
crew
is
or
more
the
than
performance of
symbol.
his actors,
It's
though
a
both were
mirror of
remarkable.
humanity.
He was referring to something
that role,
deeper, the sense that the veil between
felt
heaven
both
and earth had
brokenness
thinned,
and
and the
grace.
set of a television show had for a moment become sacred space. I've never seen anything like this. That phrase, repeated later in interviews, has become emblematic of the impact of the crucifixion scene. What does it mean to say, one has never seen anything like this? It means that no matter how many times the cross is depicted,
Some
it never
moments
loses
are
its
not
power.
made. They are
Each
visible.
generation, each artist, each believer who gazes upon it encounters something new. The cross is inexhaustible. Its depths cannot be plumbed. It also means that the reality of Christ's sacrifice cannot be domesticated. We may grow accustomed to seeing crucifixes in churches or jewelry around necks. But when confronted with the raw reality, a man suspended between earth and sky, pierced and bleeding, the shock returns. The director's words were a confession the cross had broken through his familiarity and struck him anew. Finally, it means that the crucifixion is not merely spectacle.
From that
Jenkins
day
did not
forward,
stop
the
because it was
South
too
Asian
violent
female
or too
director
dramatic.
viewed every scene through a lens
He
of
stopped because it was
humility.
too holy. Something in that moment whispered,
He realized
"This is not just
that
cinema.
art is most powerful
This
when
is
it becomes
mystery.
transparent to
Approach
truth.
with awe." From the cross to resurrection,
Even recreated.
the crucifixion,
reminded
as
everyone
overwhelming
of
as it
humanity's
is
fragility
never the final
and
word.
hope.
On the set of The Chosen, the director's pause came at the height of suffering. But the story being told does not end there. Just as Calvary gives way to the empty tomb, the moment of halted cameras points towards something greater: resurrection. For Christians, the cross and resurrection are inseparable. Without the resurrection, the cross would remain a tragedy, another instance of injustice in a world filled with them. But because Jesus rose, the cross becomes the tree of
It
life.
was not about the brutality.
What looked like
or the
humiliation
blood.
becomes
It
exaltation.
was about the compassion.
What seemed to be the triumph of darkness becomes the dawn of light. On that film set, even as actors portrayed the horror of Golgotha, there was a quiet undercurrent of hope.
Even
They knew
skeptics
that the
admitted
story does
something
not end with
profound had
nails
occurred
and
on
blood.
that set.
It ends with stone rolled away, with angels declaring he is not here.
The cross,
He is risen.
ancient and enduring.
And perhaps this
still
is why the
casts
scene was
its
so
shadow
powerful.
on human imagination.
Everyone present sensed
Did you plan
that they
the
were not
pause?
merely depicting death, but the love that conquers death. The cross as a mirror for humanity.
Silence wasn't for
When the director
drama.
whispered,
It was
"I've
for
never seen
respect.
anything like this,"
Respect.
he was also perhaps unconsciously confessing something about us.
The cross continues.
The cross
to
does
stand
not only
as
reveal who
both
Jesus
wound
is,
and healing.
it reveals who we
Sorrow
are.
and love intertwined.
On those beams of wood, human
When
cruelty
faith
is
meets
displayed
art,
in its rawest form:
Even fiction can
betrayal,
become a doorway
violence,
to
mockery,
reflection.
indifference. And yet, on those same beams,
On that
divine
night,
mercy
the crew
shines.
understood that
Forgiveness,
storytelling can be
sacrifice, love
sacred
to the
work.
end. To look
Dawn
upon the
broke over
crucifixion
the set,
is to see both the
warm
depth of our
light
sin
spilling
and the
through
height
mist.
of God's grace.
A quiet renewal.
This is why the crucifixion scene touched the crew so
It
deeply.
changed how I see every
It was not just
story
history they
about
were reenacting.
sacrifice.
It was their own story. Every nail, every thorn,
Art had
every
bowed
wound bore
before
witness
meaning,
to the truth
and
Christ
meaning
died
had
for us
answered
while
with
we were
light.
still sinners.
Stay tight
Rom
on that
5:8.
movement, John. Keep the light soft. We
The
are
cameras
getting gold
captured
here.
an actor's body. But Faith saw something more: a mirror held up to the human soul and
When
a
the
window
final
open
edit
to the heart
played,
of God. Why
Silence
film still
filled the
matters.
room once more.
Skeptics may ask, why dramatize the crucifixion again? Has it not been shown enough? But every generation needs to encounter the cross anew. Paintings, plays, and films are not replacements for the gospel. They are lenses that allow each age to see the gospel afresh. The Chosen has reached millions who might never open a Bible, but who will watch a series. Through the language of cinema, it invites
Sky
viewers
above,
not just to know about
stillness
Jesus,
below.
but to meet him.
All spoke of timeless
And when the
truth.
crucifixion arrives, viewers are
The
not
director
distant
later
observers.
said, "That
They are
scene taught me
participants
to
drawn
listen
into the
more than to
mystery,
control."
compelled to wrestle with what it means for them personally. The director's halt on set was a reminder that film at its best can be sacramental.
Why stories matter.
It can be a visible sign that points to
The
invisible
cross,
grace.
once a tool of death,
It can awaken awe-stir
became a symbol
tears
of
and draw
transformation.
hearts toward God.
It's that stillness,
When art
that
is
beat
honest
where
and
everything
humble,
stops, that
it
allows
becomes
the
a
truth
channel
to
of the
finally
divine.
surface.
Exactly.
The message for
Hesitation wasn't
humanity.
weakness, it was foresight.
What then does the crucifixion
lesson.
and that moment
When
on the
art
set of
is
The Chosen say
It
to us
opens a
today?
space for grace.
It says that God's love is not abstract. It is
The
written in
cross
blood
stood
and wood.
framed against the
It says that
sunset.
suffering is not meaningless for God Himself,
The camera
entered into
stopped
it
that
and
day,
redeemed it from
but
within.
something deeper began.
It says that
A
forgiveness
moment
is stronger than
of
hatred,
awe.
that mercy is stronger than judgment, that life is stronger than death. In a world scarred by violence, injustice, and despair,
Crucifixion scene became
the
more
cross
than
remains
history.
the answer.
It became a mirror.
Not
of
an easy
humanity.
answer, not a cheap answer, but the
In the
only
quiet that
answer
followed,
wide enough to embrace the
Hearts
brokenness
remembered
of humanity.
That love is stronger
When
than
Jenkins
death.
whispered his awe, he was
Art
naming
and
what all of
faith
us
had
feel
met,
when we come face
and
to
for a
face
moment,
with the
the veil
crucifixion,
between worlds
that
had
here in this
lifted.
terrible and beautiful moment
As the final
lies the
scene
meaning of
faded,
everything.
one
A
truth
holy
remained.
interruption
Some stories
on
are
a
meant
film
to be
set in the
felt,
21st century
not just
amid
filmed.
cameras and microphones and costumes. The mystery of the first century broke through. The crucifixion scene in The Chosen was interrupted not by error, but by awe, not by failure, but by reverence. The director could only say, "I've never seen anything like this." And perhaps that is the point. The cross is always new. It never becomes ordinary. It never fades into routine. Each time we see it, whether on a hill outside Jerusalem, in a cathedral, or on a film set, it demands our attention, our silence, our surrender. For Christians, the cross is not just an image to be filmed. It is the power of God unto salvation. It is the place where history turned, where death was undone, where love was proven to the uttermost. The cameras eventually rolled again. The scene was completed. But those who were there will never forget the moment when cinema bowed before the sacred, when art gave way to mystery, and when the crucifixion, even in reenactment, revealed once more the unfathomable love of God. Resurrection, the great mystery. Mel Gibson and the cinematic journey into the rising of Christ when cinema touches eternity. There are films made merely to entertain. There are films crafted to shock, to profit, or to leave an artistic footprint. But there are also films that become spiritual gateways, where art and faith intertwine, where audiences do not simply watch, but fall into reverent
Why
silence.
are your hearts so slow to believe?
In 2004, The Passion of the Christ by Mel Gibson achieved exactly that. Hundreds of millions of viewers around the globe sat before the screen in tears, feeling as if they themselves were standing beneath the
It is
cross.
I.
The film was not only cinema, but a global religious experience. 20 years later,
light
Gibson returns with a new project,
is
The
life.
Resurrection of Christ. If The Passion was a cinematic book of suffering, then The Resurrection promises to be a symphony of hope. Yet how can one depict the most mysterious event in Christian
The
history?
light has
An event that
conquered the
surpasses
darkness.
imagination itself, Gibson has revealed shocking details and perspectives that make audiences shudder. This article takes you into that journey from the perspective of scripture, history, and art to the supernatural vision Gibson longs to portray.
Rise
This
up.
is not merely the story of a film, but a meditation on the greatest mystery of all. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ is among us today. Mel Gibson, the filmmaker and the pilgrim. An artist of controversy,
Life
Mel
has
Gibson is no
returned.
stranger to Hollywood. He was once the star of action blockbusters, Mad Max: Lethal Weapon, and an Oscar-winning director with Braveheart.
Into the light.
Yet he is also a man scarred by scandals of alcoholism, violence, and controversial statements. At the seeming nadir of his career, Gibson emerged as a pilgrim, pouring his soul into making The
Blessed
Passion
are
of the
those
Christ.
who have not seen.
That film transformed his public image from a rebellious actor into a storyteller of faith.
This light
When
does
art
not
becomes
belong
prayer.
to this world.
In numerous interviews, Gibson confessed, "I didn't make The Passion just to make a movie. I made it as penance, as prayer." That is why every frame of the Passion bleeds with suffering and tears, yet never descends into exploitation.
He has
It
returned.
feels like a liturgy of images. With the resurrection, Gibson is even more conscious he is not merely shooting a film, but stepping onto holy ground. This is no longer cinema alone, but a global retreat through art. Resurrection, the mystery of history and eternity. Resurrection, the core of the gospel. Without the resurrection, the cross is nothing more than the tragic death of a prophet. But with the resurrection, the cross becomes the tree of life. As St. Paul boldly declared, "If Christ has not been raised, our preaching is in vain and your faith is in vain." 1 Cor 15:14. In other words, the resurrection is the hinge of human history.
Faith
It is not
begins
merely an
with
event
small
2,000 years
things.
ago, but the light that illuminates the entire flow of the universe. Resurrection, the cinematic challenge. Unlike the Passion, which can be depicted with blood whips and tangible images, the resurrection transcends the senses. No one witnessed the exact moment Christ rose. All they saw was an empty tomb and encounters afterward. How then do you film an event no one saw? How do you move audiences, not just to see with their eyes, but to tremble in their souls, Gibson remarked.
can see.
My challenge is to make audiences feel what Scripture calls glory,
Do this.
not
in
merely to
remembrance
watch a
of
dead
me.
man rise. Mel Gibson's shocking revelations. A new look at the 3 silent days. Gibson does not wish to tell only the Easter morning story. He focuses especially on the time between Friday
Good
and
Shepherd
Sunday,
has
the
returned.
so-called Holy Saturday. This is the day the Creed proclaims he descended to the dead. Gibson has suggested that the film will open realms rarely imagined, Christ entering the domain of death, shattering the gates of hell, raising Adam, Eve, and the prophets. This is not only cinema, but a vivid portrayal of 2,000 years of theological tradition from east to west. Apocalyptic imagery. According to him, the resurrection will not simply stage a few encounters. It will unfold in an almost apocalyptic style with light symbols and visions that transcend space and time. Gibson wants viewers to feel as though they have stepped through a door into eternity. A controversial
New
perspective.
day has come.
Some scholars worry Gibson might imagine too far. Yet this is precisely what makes the project compelling. It will not be a mere duplication of the Gospels, but a meditation in images where art and theology collide, from film set to altar. Cinema as liturgy, many have described. The Passion as a visual mass. With the resurrection,
That
this
light.
comparison is even stronger.
It's not from the
The
sun.
film is not only to be watched, but to be participated in. The audience will no longer stand outside, but be drawn into the very mystery. A global resonance. Today's world is rife with wars, crises, and anxiety. The message of resurrection life stronger than death is more urgent than ever. This film could become a lighthouse of hope, especially for a generation wandering in darkness.
The promise
The message of
still
Mel Gibson
echoes.
and the resurrection. Art as mission. Gibson once said,
Every
if
life
even one
is a
person returns to
miracle."
faith because of the film, then all the effort is worth it. This is his uniqueness. Gibson does not create for Oscars or
water
revenue, but for a
Carries new
calling.
life.
Resurrection today. Resurrection is not just a story from 2,000 years ago. It is a call to each of us today, even in the night of sickness or despair, dawn awaits. Even as the world collapses in chaos, there is still an empty tomb, proving evil will not prevail. A personal invitation.
Is not.
Ultimately, the film confronts every viewer with a question. Do you believe the one who rose can also transform your life? Art, faith, and the light of dawn. The passion of the Christ revealed to the world the power of sacrificial love. The resurrection of Christ will reveal the power of triumphant love. Mel Gibson, through his own personal trials, is becoming a storyteller of faith. He demonstrates that cinema, when placed in God's hands, can become a global liturgy. And above all, he reminds us, resurrection is not merely an event in history, but an eternal heartbeat in the soul of humanity. The biblical and theological backdrop
Every
of
step
resurrection.
is a prayer.
The empty tomb, the symbol of reversal. In every gospel account, no one saw the exact moment Christ rose. What they saw was the empty tomb. This paradoxical sign, emptiness, becomes fullness. Mary Magdalene came to mourn, but heard her name called. Peter and John ran and saw folded linens. The silence of the tomb rang like a song. Death has lost. Cinema thrives on imagery, but here the emptiness itself becomes the climax. Gibson must craft the scene so that audiences feel not lack, but invisible explosion through light music and the faces of witnesses. The appearances from fear to mission.
Is a prayer.
The risen Christ did not appear as a mighty God, but humbly walking with disciples to Emmaus, eating grilled fish, calling Mary by name. The message is clear. Resurrection does not shatter the ordinary, but saturates it. Gibson has hinted he wants to capture this nearness, so audiences feel Christ is not distant, but among them. At the theology of Silent Saturday. For centuries, the Church has pondered Holy Saturday, the day God was silent. Yet that silence was not abandonment, but God at work in the depths, Christ descending into the abyss to bring light to the unimaginable.
Begins in the void.
Gibson revealed he wants to include this descent. No film has dared to portray it directly.
Resurrection.
Images of hell's gates breaking chains, shattering, could become both cinematic climax and living theology. Symbolic artistry in Gibson's cinema. Color and light. In The Passion, Gibson used darkness, red blood, and storms to depict pain.
Knows how to pray.
In The Resurrection, he envisions overwhelming light. Not technical light, but apocalyptic radiance, touching not just the eyes, but the soul. Biblical symbols, famous for embedding symbols.
Hope is born.
Gibson may use grain sprouting life from death. Dawn resurrection as light chasing night, water and fire.
My heart.
Baptism and the spirit fruits of resurrection. Table the disciples' meal as the Eucharist
Where
enduring
I
to
am.
today. A music as prayer.
There is life.
The score of The Passion. By John Debney became iconic. For The Resurrection, Gibson desires music as liturgy, a sonic prayer drawing viewers into participation. Social and religious impact. An age of faith crisis.
Is a miracle.
Today, many young people drift from the church, dismissing faith as past relic. The world drowns in consumerism, social media wars, and mental collapse. A film like The Resurrection is
There
not
is
just
no night
retelling, but awakening.
that does not end.
It proclaims that hope never expires. A miracle of art. Perhaps the very fact that Hollywood dares to portray resurrection is itself a miracle. Hollywood is often associated with violence, lust, and atheism. Yet here a sacred work resounds like a bell in the marketplace. Testimonies from beyond Christianity, when non-believers watched The Passion, many wept not out of belief, but sensing unconditional love. With The Resurrection, Gibson hopes not only believers but outsiders will feel summoned. If death is
Every
not the
flame
end,
is
then
a
why
word
do
of
I
faith.
live? Mel Gibson's own spiritual journey. From darkness to light, Gibson admits he lived in shadows, addiction scandal, loneliness. Yet in that darkness, he rediscovered traditional Catholic faith. For him, making films about Christ is not work, but healing. Art as confession. The Passion was a public confession. The Resurrection is a hymn of praise. One shows pain, the other glory.
We live by love.
Gibson seems to say, Christ did not only die for me, he rose for me. A storyteller of faith. Amid the noise of Hollywood, Gibson is remarkable. Not for handsome stardom, but for daring to be a narrator of faith. He fears neither criticism nor exile, as long as the gospel is proclaimed. The message for humanity. Resurrection in personal life. The film is not only to be watched, but lived. Each of us carries a Friday pain, a Saturday silence, and a Sunday dawn. Audiences will realize resurrection is not only Christ's, but theirs. The call to step out of the tomb. Today's tomb may be addiction, despair, hatred, or loneliness. Resurrection is when the stone rolls away and freedom begins. The film thus becomes a call to rise here and now.
No death.
The future is no longer void. Because of resurrection, humanity's destiny is not a black hole of nothingness, but the banquet of heaven. Every small kindness, every forgiveness, every sacrifice is a seed of eternity. When art becomes revelation, the resurrection of Christ is not merely a sequel to the Passion.
I am the way.
It is the grand finale where pain is transfigured into glory,
and the life.
despair into hope. Mel Gibson has chosen the hardest path to portray Christianity's holiest mystery on screen. But precisely because it is hard, it can shake millions of hearts.
Begins with faith.
And in the end, the film, like the resurrection itself, leaves each of us with the question: do you believe that light can conquer the darkness within your own life? For resurrection is not only a story of 2,000 years ago, but a heartbeat echoing in every soul today.